intention, and the Green Groups, they didn't want to have a public debate about it, they wanted to talk to the farmers. So they put all the stuff about how awful the special size tax was into Farmers Weekly, because they wanted the farmers then to lobby their MPs and to lobby the government against it. So the government then only hears this, all of the sounds from the farmers, this is going to be awful, loads of money, and there's no public outcry because they managed to avoid engaging in public debate in the mainstream media. And it worked, and they scrapped the idea of a tax. Not done. So they're very clever at how they use it and how they don't use it. Another thing to add to that is how the internet is used and abused, and things disappear, and how it's controlled. So I mean, everyone knows about them editing their Wikipedia entries, it's very common. But using
branch apps.
Yeah, exactly. using Google rankings, I understand how it works. You can basically lobbyists can be hired to create phony, corporate-friendly, or whoever it is they're lobbying for, content, fake blogs, fake press releases, and nothing to read. They shove it all out on the internet, and the weight of the volume of the stuff kind of basically raises, goes up on the Google rankings, and the bad stuff disappears onto the second page, basically, and nobody clicks through to the second page. So yeah, exactly. So it's a way of kind of hiding. But it's a way of hiding kind of bad content about it, and it's quite prevalent now. Most of the big agencies, if not all of them, do this thing where they manipulate Google rankings to hide critical content. So we all use Google, and it is incredibly unreliable as a source of information. And of course, they're all across social media. They have quite elaborate, very elaborate. It's not tracking surveillance. Lobbyist who specialises in crisis communication, and he said if you've got a crisis and you've got activism, and you want to not find the ones that are putting out the most volume, you want to find the influencers, he said, the influencers, and then find out, because if you can tackle the influencer, then you can stop the stuff spreading, basically. So they have very sophisticated ways of kind of monitoring kind of activist networks, and who's putting stuff out. Understand technical.
But how do they tackle it?
Well, there are ways and means of doing it. I mean, the sort of nuclear option is to legal means, bring in a law firm who is right, and the like. You can, I mean, I'll talk about in a bit about how they deal with opposition groups and things. There are ways and means of doing
they
it.
Can become the opposition. They can actually infiltrate, of course. That's an obvious.
Yeah, so I will come on to corporate,
which obviously goes on a lot.
Like I just noticed this morning, I tweeted a lot about this, photos and stuff the last couple of days. Some conservative political scientist guys followed me on Twitter.
Yeah,
and just,
I mean, I wouldn't be too worried about them.
Yeah,
I mean, they really have,
that.
from what I've gleaned, they have these very sophisticated systems which we can pick up. So if you basically badmouth a corporation, 140 characters or whatever, they will find it, and then they will work out whether you are kind of a threat or not. And it's, they are monitoring reputations. If you imagine that reputation can be worth billions to a company, Unilever, for example, its reputation is worth billions, they will spend quite a lot of money to protect that reputation. So they are across threats. Doesn't just come from activist networks that like to flatter themselves, but they are certainly ever watchful, put it like that. So that's kind of, they manipulate the mainstream media, and they are all across social media and the internet. Another key technique, so you've got the access and spinning the media, and another key technique that they use, which is kind of the essence of public relations, because a lot of these lobbyists are actually based in really big global communications companies which do everything, but they also do public relations. And the essence of public relations is about, well, if advertising is about blowing your own trumpet, public relations is about getting somebody else to say something good, but what you want them to say about you, right? So it's all about the third party endorsement. So, and lobbyists do this, it's absolutely at the heart of what they do. So you need to get somebody else to endorse your campaign. So if you're, I don't know, BAT or a tobacco company, you can stand up and say, we don't think we should be regulated. Don't bring in paid packaging. Don't, you know, hide our fags behind shutters and all the things that we can do to kind of dissuade people from smoking. And if BAT stands up and says that, well, we'd say, well, you would say that. It's self-interested, isn't it? So what you want to do is you want to get other people to say it for different reasons. So the tobacco industry is absolute pioneers at this, what they call third-party technique. So they will get all sorts of people. They've funded news agencies. So MPs in here will hear, you know, armies of news agents saying, don't regulate tobacco, it's going to kill our businesses, right? And they won't see Philip Morris International behind the news agency. Or they'll get former coppers to say, if you do this, if you regulate tobacco in this way, plain packaging, it's going to increase smuggling, for example, which is bollocks. But then MPs and the public hear ex-coppers, you know what they're talking about, they're credible, they're independent, they're whatever. They hear them, they don't hear Philip Morris International, for example. So it's a very clever technique, and that's basically a lot of the voices that we hear in the media are you know, third parties for corporations. There's a classic one which was, so there was the health insurance got together, I think it was about 2006, before 2006, and they were like, how to get more people to take out private health insurance without being seen to undermine the NHS? How are we going to do it? How are we going to get people to take out more? Because people in this country don't do it.
Scare the shit out of them.
Scare the shit out of them. Well, yeah, what they did is they started paying some of the think tanks. So there's a think tank down there called Reform. Prudential is one of its biggest funders. And then Reform does loads of reports in the press about how, you know, the NHS can't cope and we can't afford it and we need to start thinking of other ways of paying for it. We maybe need to go and pay to see our GP, so you might have to get insured for that. But also what they did is they set up a group, or they supported a group called Doctors for Reform, right? Doctors for Reform. And they were an unverified 1,000 doctors, and you know, they might have been good. But they were absolutely, the sole purpose of which was to speak in popular terms to the media, because we trust, and you've just heard Jackie, we trust doctors more than any other profession to speak the truth. So instead of hearing Prudential speak about the crisis in the NHS and how the reforms are necessary and stuff, on the Jeremy Vine show, and we listen to Radio 2, popular lunchtime show, 5 million listeners. They're not all paying attention, but there are 5 million listeners. And you've got this guy, spokesman for Doctors and Reform, sitting on there saying this is why we need to reform the NHS. He is a GP. The fact that he specialises in Botox is neither here nor there, but he is, and they didn't say that. But what they don't do is they don't say that he is a spokesman for Doctors and Reform, which is associated with Reform, the think tank, which is funded by the David Shaw, and you trace it back to how we're going to get more people to take out private health insurance. So that usual kind of, it's not that it's secret, because if it's secret you get found out and there's a scandal. It's just not disclosed, particularly, you know, nobody need to talk about it. So yeah, that's a very common way of doing it. There's these front groups, you probably all know about astroturfing campaigns, you know, tobacco companies going out with clipboards, getting signatures of why we shouldn't have plain packaging, going into children's playgrounds and getting people to sign up saying, oh yeah, they want to take the health warnings off tobacco packets and rubbish, so there are a million, and then you've got, you know, however many signatures on a petition that you can hand over to the government. So there's just lots of ways that they use third parties. So that's another absolutely key technique for the lobbying industry. I think final thing we'll talk about, and I'm not going to talk about it much, but is how to deal with opposition groups. This can be anything from a friendly NGO to a small activist group opposing fracking or HS2 or whatever it is, NHS privatisation. The key thing is knowing your enemy. You know, they are very good at finding out who opposes them. And then they use a very common technique. It seems to be particularly the large multinationals against big campaigns is to divide and conquer. If you split your opposition into little bits, and there are strategy documents from tobacco companies, the oil companies, the GM companies, of how they've gone about this. So they put their NGOs into quadrants. These people we can work with, and they might include, I don't know, some of the big NGOs that don't want to be seen to be too hard, and these will be more activistic types, probably got more grassroots connections, and probably are not going to, well, go on to the next stage, because once you've divided them, then you can start talking to what they call the realists, and you can persuade them into agreeing with you, maybe compromise a little bit, but you can certainly, what you want to do is you want to consult with them and bring them into the fold, and what you want to do is you want to isolate the radicals over there. So they try, I mean, I don't know if they did it or not with the tax justice lot, because we went to a meeting and they started talking about how they were going to talk to some of the bigger NGOs and how they weren't going to talk to the tax justice network who've done so much of the running on it. And, but you can see how then, you know, some of the bigger NGOs start sitting on platforms with the tax advisors to some of the big oil companies and, you know, the like. And they have these conferences where they discuss tax avoidance, but, you know, it doesn't mean paying any more tax, it just means they've got to communicate their tax position better, you know, all this kind of stuff. So it's about, yeah, I mean, classic kind of divide and rule. They like their military metaphors and their military strategies, which is good, because then, yeah, the next
ex-military in there.
Surveillance, divide and conquer. I don't really want to go into smear tactics too much, but if it's a serious case and we've got an isolated individual, you can do that. Certainly there has been a concerted campaign, or it appears to be a concerted campaign against, for example, climate change scientists who have been on the receiving end of very unpleasant threats and sneers and the like. If it's not coordinated, it looks coordinated, you know what I mean? So it's kind of, but then we're not talking conspiracy here, we're just talking that there are networks of power, and yeah, the last thing you want is climate change scientists reaching the mainstream media, for example.
We actually tried to popularize it, but the Stratfor was actually going after the Tamasins. Yeah, so there's supposedly 4 types of activists. One is actually the opportunists, realists, idealists, and the radicals.
Yeah.
We seem to have ended up with the anti-fracking and Occupy. We've got the radicals who are actually too bloody minded to actually just give up. That's why we're partly here.
I think, well, the thing is, you've not got to think like that. I mean, you've got to think, you've got to be, if you know they're dividable, and I sense myself being isolated. I'm a lobbyist, I should have said from the top. I'm a lobbyist, I lobby for transparency regulations. I've lobbied the government and I've spoken to ministers and stuff like that, but there have been times where there has been a large meeting with the minister and all the NGOs and moderates and whatever have been there talking to the minister, and then there's been me and my colleague in the 2 o'clock meeting where basically, you know, I might as well have been talking to a bin, frankly. So, and it's a way of not having, I mean, you know, I don't want to flatter myself, it's a way of not having me in a meeting with lots of
Are they like sexist, do you think?
Huh?
Do you think they're like sexist? Or?
Don't think they're sexist. No, politics is quite a sexist environment.
No, I mean in the sense of, okay, forget that word sexist. Do you think like in a sense they just like push aside, they don't take you seriously, or they don't listen to you? Or...
Yeah, I mean, look, I've had meetings with ministers. The thing is, the proposals they put forward to regulate lobbyists in this country are literally nonsensical. I mean, it's not just kind of a rhetorical thing. They don't make any sense at all. And so when you sit there and you try to be rational and you say, you're trying to justify something that doesn't make any sense, like going to white doesn't make any sense, it's quite dull, and you're sitting there talking to ministry, and you just, it was a lesson in politics for me, hitting the wall of kind of rational discussion. We're not in that world. Okay.
Give us a couple of minutes on that, because I think it's a very powerful part of propaganda that there are these moves to deal with lobbying, you know, you have to read the picture. I mean, it's like, oh, we have this government, this is bad.
Oh yeah, no.
So can you say a little bit about it?
Yeah, the key word to remember is bogus. Right, so they introduced, okay, well, very briefly, just before the last election, there was a lobbying scandal. David Cameron